Guilt is not a moral instinct. It is a conditioned response. And the science of exactly how it gets built inside a person, without their knowledge, without their consent, has been documented for 80 years. What you are about to see is the architecture. If you have ever felt guilty for having a thought, not something you did, not something you said, just a thought, that guilt was not yours to begin with. It was placed there through a precise, documented, scientifically replicable process. By the end of this video, you will know the name of every mechanism used to build it, and the names of the researchers who proved it could be done. But there is one mechanism I want to show you last. The one that does not feel like control at all. It feels exactly like being loved. And I am saving that one for the end. Most people believe guilt is proof of conscience. Science has known since 1928 that it is proof of something else entirely. In 1928, the founder of behavioral psychology, John B. Watson, made a claim that shocked the scientific world. He wrote, "Give me a dozen healthy infants and my own specified world to bring them up in, and I will guarantee to train any one of them to become any type of specialist I might select." Watson was not making a philosophical argument. He was describing a mechanism, a set of inputs, applied during a specific developmental window, that produced predictable psychological outputs. The output he was describing is what most people call their personality. 10 years earlier, Russian physiologist Ivan Pavlov had already discovered the underlying mechanism. He noticed something strange while studying digestion in dogs. When a bell rang before feeding, eventually the dogs began salivating. The brain had learned a shortcut, a neutral signal, linked to a biological response. This became known as classical conditioning. Now apply that to guilt. If certain thoughts are repeatedly paired with punishment, fear, or emotional withdrawal, the brain learns to trigger guilt automatically. Not after the thought, before it even finishes forming. The guilt feels like a moral compass, but in reality it is a conditioned reflex. Installed during a developmental window most people cannot remember. And this is only the first layer, because conditioning operates below conscious awareness, which means understanding it is not enough to stop it. There are 4 more layers, and each one is harder to see than the last. There is another mechanism that targets something deeper than reflexes. It targets your ability to question them. It was documented in 1961, and the results were so disturbing the university tried to stop the experiment. In 1961, a psychologist at Yale decided to test that assumption. His name was Stanley Milgram. Milgram recruited ordinary people, teachers, engineers, office workers. They believed they were participating in a study on learning. Each wrong answer triggered an instruction: deliver an electric shock. The voltage increased each time. And yet, 65% of participants continued to the maximum voltage. Not because they were cruel, because the authority structure made compliance feel moral. Milgram later wrote, "Ordinary people, simply doing their jobs, can become agents in a destructive process. Authority creates obedience. Conditioning creates reflexive guilt, but neither explains something deeper: why questioning itself feels dangerous." In 1987, Harvard psychologist Daniel Wegner ran a famous experiment. Participants were told they could think about anything except one thing: a white bear. Every time the thought appeared, they rang a bell. The result? They rang it constantly. Wegner called this ironic process theory. Now imagine a child told that certain thoughts are sinful, dangerous, shameful. They cannot stop the thoughts. So their brain builds an internal surveillance system. The moment the thought appears, guilt activates, not as morality, but as a warning signal. In 1967, psychologist Martin Seligman called it learned helplessness. When organisms experience repeated negative outcomes, they cannot escape. They eventually stop trying. But the final one is the most powerful, because it does not feel like control, it feels like love. In the 1950s, Harry Harlow ran a disturbing experiment with infant monkeys. One mother was made of wire. It provided milk. The other was covered in soft cloth. Harlow proved something profound. Warmth, contact, comfort are more fundamental to survival than food. Now combine the two. The deepest human need, attachment, delivered on a variable schedule. Your brain cannot distinguish between losing attachment and losing safety. which means guilt becomes the fastest way to restore belonging. The people who built this pattern in you were rarely doing it deliberately. They were operating from their own conditioning. The guilt you feel is not evidence of who you are. It is evidence of what was built inside you. Conditioned fear memories are stored in the amygdala, not the rational brain. They cannot simply be erased. They can only be overwritten. When a person challenges deeply installed guilt, the brain responds as if survival itself is under threat, and that reaction is why most people stop.